showtime.
It's time for that radio show everyone loves.
Do not attempt to change the station. Just listen, and we'll keep broadcasting.
It's time to begin the show.
103.9 LI News Radio presents Your Island, the very best in talk radio, with your host, Tom Schilero.
And once again, welcome back as we're heading to the 3 o'clock hour. Now we're bringing back Ken Bombace. There's just a lot to talk about. Obviously, the former president very much in the news, looking at the Justice Department, the FBI, all involved in a search warrant that a lot of people have taken a political position about. But there's also some practical knowledge that would need to be attained about that. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Our number here is 631-451-1039. But hold the phone calls. We're going to take phone calls during the last segment of the show. Once again, Ken Bombace, a new contributor to our program. You'll hear Ken every Wednesday now at 12:35, starting next week, August 31st. We'll have Ken on during that time segment, talking about all the different aspects in terms of policing, in terms of criminal intelligence, having a lot to do with global threat, as CEO of the Global Threat Solutions, and so on. Ken Bombace, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back, Tom. Lots to talk about.
You know, this whole thing, there's a threat out there right now, if I may use that word, against law enforcement, particularly the FBI. Now, I know you know, and a lot of people in the FBI, as I do too, family members, just hard, dedicated, well-educated folks. In order to get into the FBI, they certainly favor people with law degrees, accounting degrees, and so on. They also favor people that have come right out of the military in terms of the Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Green Berets, all part of the best and the brightest when it comes to law enforcement. But they're kind of taking it on the chin right now. And we're seeing threats being made. Department of Homeland Security is saying this. Is there any way to try to make some sense of it? Because I'm not exactly sure why this is happening. I believe it is happening. Again, the rank and file agents are being threatened. Their families are being threatened and so on, similar to what we had with Supreme Court justices right after Roe v. Wade and so on. It seems like an event takes place and this emerges. How do we make some sense of this? And first of all, is it happening? And the question is, why is it happening? And the question is, what can be done about it, Ken?
So, Tom, I always like to start these discussions with, this is unacceptable behavior during any times, regardless of any investigation, whether there's speculation of politics, completely unacceptable for people to be threatening FBI agents, people who are out there protecting us every day. Same thing with our police officers. We know that they've had a tough time over the last few years, people trying to demonize them. This is unacceptable behavior. These are people that are sacrificing for our country and our communities every day. And like you said, the FBI agents that I know and have worked with closely, these are people that, have dedicated their lives. They're not there to get rich. They're there to serve our country at the highest level. So that's unacceptable. And as far as how this came about, well, unfortunately, with the tens of thousands of FBI agents, it only takes a few FBI personnel at the highest levels that get involved in and even get involved in corruption, like we saw with the altering of documents during the Russia investigation. That's all it takes for people to have a very strong emotional response. And Tom, let's make this clear. I mean, most people, even if you completely oppose, let's use Mar-a-Lago, and you say, this is politics, the FBI shouldn't be doing this, this is crazy. That's a normal response that somebody with those political views might have. What we're seeing is those people on the fringe. These are unstable people who would possibly be threatening an FBI agent or their facilities. These are not representative of anybody or any party, clearly. I think everyone knows that. But how did it come about? It came about because of those acts. Politics, FBI is supposed to be designed to be outside of politics and be resilient from the pressures of politics. And we've seen that politics have infiltrated it, even in the slightest number of people at the highest level, when it has such a big impact on our country that we all watched happen. It's people take that very seriously, and there's an emotional response we're seeing right now.
Yeah. And the individual that attacked, I think it was Cincinnati, Ohio, the FBI office, and then he ended up getting chased police and took his own life. I think he was actually shot by the local police. You wonder that becomes, when that happens, and then of course all the chatter on the social media and so on shows there's a lot of organizations out there that want to emulate this individual, that wants to go out. In fact, he put it out on the social media to follow me, gun, attack federal agents, and so on. One wonders, is this a fringe element? Because it almost seems like it happens in this one instance, but then you see thousands of different threats throughout the number of field offices that are going on around the country. And you wonder if it's just people that are going to make these threats but don't have any wherewithal to carry it out. Or, and I guess the simple question to ask, Ken, are there that many Looney Tunes in this country that would consider even doing what the guy in Cincinnati did, who lost his life over it because he had a belief that the FBI acted against a candidate for public office or a former president that he so supported that he was willing to lose his life over that? Is this beyond the pale of trying to understand, Ken?
Right. So to answer that question, are there that many Looney Tunes out there, people this unstable? I mean, to take action, no. These are very isolated cases, statistically speaking. However, what you do have is a lot of people are going to do just what you said. You're going to find them on social media, sending letters and all sorts of threats and nonsense that we're going to see going against them. Not nonsense in the way that has to be investigated. That's the problem. Every one of them has to be investigated. Nothing can be taken lightly. But what I'm saying is you probably have a lot of people doing that have no intention of really doing anything. Right, but that takes resources. Those have to be investigated and followed up on. And let's be clear. I mean, any well-known politician in their office or the FBI itself, they get threats all the time. This isn't a new thing. You know, the FBI, it's law enforcement, just like police departments. They get threats all the time that have to be investigated. But now this is something very recent and specific that has to do with the very divisive politics we're seeing in our country. And before you had asked me what can be done, and we've talked a little bit about this before. I think the only real solution, the only real cure for this mistrust by some, with the FBI or the DOJ, has to come from within. And I think that, let's face it, there were some legitimate concerns, like the person that I mentioned who altered documents. We had the text messages between FBI personnel. People see that became public, and people see that and they are shocked and they have a mistrust for the agency. So really what needs to happen is those things need to be handled appropriately by the FBI, and people want to see action taken, people fired, and maybe people criminally charged. There can't be a two-tiered justice system where these people, because of their position in the DOJ and it's the U.S. Attorney's Office or the DOJ and the FBI, that they're exempt. People want to see action taken with those few that take those actions, and it's been proven, and then it seems like nothing really happened. I think that there needs to be a strong effort, robust effort by the FBI and the DOJ to root those things out and make it known to the public. Say, we're here for you, to serve you. We're not here to serve, politically partisan people who are within our ranks.
With that and all of that, I think of the one incident in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Was it almost 2 years ago, year and a half ago, the George Floyd incident. One incident having to do with one police officer in a series of events completely changed the way of policing in this country that I believe resulted in higher crime rates, police being demoralized from all over the country, from Maine to California, the riots that took place in Portland and in Seattle and in Baltimore, all of that taking place. One wonders what triggers our society in terms of a movement in directions like a terror. Which does happen, I think, in terms of what this Cincinnati, Ohio guy was trying to do, was an act of terror to go along with what he believed was wrongdoing. I'm having a frustrating conversation with you right now because I don't know what we can do about that. I don't know what we could have done about the George Floyd situation so that people looked at it as it should have been, as an isolated incident, that this happened, but this was not a tradition of policing in this country, yet it was treated that way. So much so that today police officers are still feeling the brunt of that singular event that took place there. And I'm saddened over that. And to the point that the Attorney General essentially said the biggest threat in this country is the white supremacist groups, and that white supremacy is the biggest threat to this country. And somebody like yourself who has worked in counterterrorism and has worked overseas in Iraq and all at other places, how do you react to a statement like that? When I see the neo-Nazis or the Aryan Nation in this country hold a rally, they get 8 people. And they get 10,000 counter demonstrators. Where is all of this coming from? And you and I both know that it's not true, but yet it becomes accepted.
Yeah, so it's a good point. When I was a detective, and anytime there was anything where we live, anything at all to do with white supremacy at any level, say somebody spray painted something, it would be a cover story in the newspaper, right? That's how rare it was and how seriously it was taken. I think that there's a lot of people out there that want to paint a different narrative to move away from the reality of things. And when you talk about George Floyd, it's a great example of this. You know where the real problem was there that I see, especially when it concerns law enforcement, was our elected officials at every level. Every single level failed us at that time. So listen, a terrible thing happened. Everybody watched it. It was emotionally impactful for every person in America. But it needed to be made. First of all, those people needed to be held accountable, and they were, clearly. But it needed to be made clear at every level, Tom, every single level, that, yes, peaceful protest is acceptable. Non-peaceful protest absolutely isn't. We will use all of our resources to investigate you, to arrest you, to bring you to justice. If you don't get a free pass because there was an atrocity committed by one police officer. You don't get a free pass to hurt people and burn down buildings and cause billions of dollars of damage across the country. And the problem with that was the elected leaders. We had elected leaders, even Nancy Pelosi, and I don't remember the exact quote, but they asked her in an interview what she thought about this, and about some violence that took place. And she says, well, people will do what people do. And she moved on to the next thing. She blew it off so ridiculously that, people take that as a green light. Yeah, and it happened at every level in cities across our country. The mayor, who I think was Seattle, says when they were like, there was mass movement to take over a part of the city. And they're like, well, what do you think's going to happen? And she says, well, maybe it'll be a summer of love. And she laughs and smiles. That's not the response we need, Tom. We need to say, if these people try this, we're going to use our law enforcement resources. We will use all of our resources to bring these people to justice. We are not going to have a lawless city. That was never said. It was never said in these cities across the country, Tom. And that's where the real injustice, that's why you saw that widespread violence. We had, I think it was in Portland, the federal courthouse there had a sustained attack for over 30 days. They were trying arson attempts every day. And when they tried to bring in Homeland Security to support the police there, we had Democratic politicians strongly opposing that, calling them jackbooted Nazis. It was insanity. That's where the real problem I see, the falling apart of our structure in our country. That's how it happened.
We're not talking about ancient history here. We're talking about it was just really a summer and a half ago or a year and a half ago when it took place. And yet we're still feeling the effects of that. When one looks at the group Antifa, which organized, I think, a lot of that violence against police officers in Portland and Seattle. And yes, that summer of love, a total disconnect between the establishment in terms of elected officials in certain cities and so on, and the support for law enforcement put us in that such disarray. But yet moving in a direction where now we're seeing, we're hearing FBI agents are being targeted. This is out there. And FBI agents are getting memos. Watch when you drive home at night. Watch what's happening in your neighborhood. They're getting all these memos to do that. And you wonder, is this a real threat? Or is this something that the media is portraying? Because I happen to believe it is a real threat. I think there are forces that are out there that possibly support these groups that exist, whether it's Oath Keepers or Proud Boys, on the other side, Antifa, Black Lives Matters, and so on. It just, we seem to have gotten away, and that whether we can effectively identify domestic terrorism in this country and do it properly. Do you think there is a way to do that?
Yeah, first of all, we have to remove the politics from it, Tom. You can't treat these people when we know they're responsible for violence. You can't treat them like heroes. You can't. I don't care what injustice was done to somebody. We can't let it be an excuse for anarchy. We can't let it be an excuse to make heroes out of people who are committing criminal acts. That's the real problem. And I have to say, with what we've seen over the last, like you said, this is an ancient history. What we've seen on January 6th compared to this, that period of time when we had months and months and months of violence and burning police stations and police cars and people being murdered, police officers being murdered, and nothing being done about it, really. That's the time, and me and a lot of people that I know, that's the one time I was afraid for my country, and I was afraid for the future of my country. January 6th was a few hours. Horrible incident, should have never happened, but I don't think it compares in any way to what we saw for the better part of a year of violence across the country, where it seems like to this day, where are the hearings? Where are the hearings on that, and what should have been done better, and how we could have avoided that? That's where there's a lot of hypocrisy. And as far as targeting these groups, law enforcement knows that law enforcement has great intelligence capabilities, especially at the federal levels. But you have to have the political will to go after those people, unfortunately. We're seeing all of these activist DAs, Tom, and prosecutors. Yeah. We can't have that. We cannot have that.
Yeah, and you're right about those DAs. I mean, they actually turn your stomach when you see some of the people they're releasing. It's interesting. We evolved into this part of our discussion. I want to throw this at you because a lot of my listeners will call me or send me text messages and so on. As you said, the capability of federal law enforcement to identify. Yet they had video of a bomber that supposedly set bombs at the DNC and the RNC or what have you. They had good video of him or pictures taken. Yet we don't hear a word about that. Have you ever heard anything? Was this person real? Was this person fabricated by either the right or the left in this country? I'm at a loss when people ask me that question. I wonder if you have any answers.
I don't have any answers as far as the validity to it, but it's a concerning problem that we have, that we even have to question it. Right? It used to be when you had a case, an incident, something like that, this was an official statement put out by the FBI of a crime that was committed. And you would, first of all, you would know once and when something happened with it or if it was valid, but it would be completely removed from politics. When something that serious potentially happened, politics should be removed from that, and we should be focusing on the facts. And that's something that's really changed in our country over the last few years. And unfortunately become acceptable, and I think that's something, but that's the big challenge here. If there is some potential violence or acts like that, we shouldn't be questioning, was that just put out for political reasons? Is that they're doing that because they want to make, we've heard so much of this, them trying to make, the far right groups and the far left groups look extremely bad, and it's all for political reasons. But what it does is it leaves all of us in the middle, the Americans, wondering what really happened. Is this real or not real? And once we can't tell the difference, that's a dangerous time in our country, I think, Tom.
I'm stuck on that one. I'll have to tell you, I'm stuck with this because I could picture his picture. The pictures were released. They said they found these incendiary devices, both at the RNC and the DNC. They didn't go off because they said they were elementary, the way they were put together. But yet there was the guy was wearing a mask. But you alluded to it. The ability, the high-tech ability to identify people like this under the circumstances that we have today, because he was under camera, we could still ask the question, why? Why was he not identified? And then that certainly brings a lot of eyebrows being raised as to this. Again, I'm not trying to be a part of a conspiracy theory, but kind of scary, though. That's Ken? Yeah.
So, the capabilities are extremely good, but what I would say is, so in that case, right, look, you're wearing a mask. Cameras, I've gone through a lot of investigations where the first thing you do is check the cameras. It's very rare. You're like, oh my God, there he is. We have a clear ID. It doesn't happen that often. Cameras aren't that great. It's not that clear. You can't get license plates. I could count the number of times we were able to get a license plate from a camera on one hand easily because it's very rare. But there's so much more than that. There's interviewing people. There's cameras down the street where that person possibly didn't have a mask on. They're going to check all of that. A very broad spectrum of things that they look into. So it does. I guess I don't have any knowledge if they've confirmed this is legitimate or not, but the fact that we even question it, like you're saying, have to even consider a possible conspiracy is something we wouldn't have taken seriously 5 years ago. But today, it's almost like you have to consider everything because we've seen things that are outlandish, but they're real, and they were politically influenced.
Yeah. I know, and I hesitate to bring it up, but it keeps being brought up quite a bit. In any event, Ken Bombace, you'll hear Ken every Wednesday at the 12:35 hour, brand new contributor. Ken, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. When we get back, let's take some phone calls. 631-451-1039 when we get back.
I had to start again. Just my children and my wife. Thank my lucky stars to be living here today. 'Cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away.